Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, thank you so much for giving us your time on ITV Gold. I hope you're doing well today.
Yes, thank you. It's good being back with you.
Of course, we love when you address the South Asian community. So again, thank you for your time. Let's go right into it, Borough President. My first question to you has to deal with the biggest news coming in today. The CDC has updated its guidelines for masks. They're saying that in unvaccinated areas or areas where these cases are going up, they are saying they're recommending masks to be worn indoors. They also went ahead and said that when schools open up, they recommend masks for students, teachers, and anybody working there, regardless of their vaccination status. So my first question to you is, how will you handle this new guidance in Brooklyn Borough? And will you be bringing back mask mandates if needed?
Well, I believe, and I will continue to say, we should follow the science. It's important to look at our amazing those who flow with information, such as the CDC and your local Department of Health and mental hygiene, like we have here in New York City in the State Department of Health. The combined information that, number one, on the federal level, and then number two, on the local level. Every local municipality should go as more stringent than the CDC if they see the need. I believe I'm going to wear my mask as much as possible out of an abundance of caution, and I will encourage other New Yorkers to do the same.
Right. You know, we are hearing in projections such as we may see again 4,000 deaths per day. If this kind of stuff happens, Borough President, I have to ask you, are there any talks of shutdown right now?
No, that is not part of the conversation right now. And what we are learning now is that, number one, let's be clear, COVID is a formidable opponent. It has shown many different strands, many different forms. There's so much we don't know. And we have to continue to protect and pivot. As COVID pivots and changes, we must pivot. We can't be so compliance to one way of thinking without realizing that this virus is changing, it is altering, and it's doing different things. So we must do the same. And if there's a need, which I don't see that right now, if there's a need to look at modifying some of our behavior, we must be open to do so and understand that. But it appears that we've been doing a great job. We were caught off guard before, but New Yorkers are doing their job and government is doing its job. But we have to vaccinate. We want to continue to encourage people to get the vaccine so that they can get as much protection as possible.
Right. And on these vaccination rates, how are you feeling about the borough as well as New York City? Do you think we've reached enough vaccination, ranges as well? Also, there are a lot of communities of color that are still disproportionately, in fact, affected by vaccine distribution. What do you have to say about that?
We have to be creative and find ways to motivate people to vaccinate. Everything from giving incentives to free Broadway theater tickets to giving away whatever items to just encouraging people based on the health. And then we must get on the ground. I say this over and over again. Right. We should mobilize the census team that we had before, allow them to come back and go to those communities and organizations to encourage people in the language and in the cultural norms that they're used to. And then we must mobilize the credible messengers, our pastors, our Sikh leaders, our imams, our rabbis, all the different groups and organizations, and let them be part of this push to vaccinate based on where people live and how people communicate.
Right. The New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio has actually said that public employees must be vaccinated or face weekly testing. This is happening in New York City and California right now. What are your comments on that?
Well, the mayor must make the decision on how to protect and pivot in this city to deal with this virus. I think it's important to also bring in the unions, allow the unions to be part of the conversation because they are the credible messengers for their employees that they represent. And it's always easier when you bring in those who represent the employees to say, here's where we are, give them the information, and come together as a partner. I think that announcement would have gone across rather well if the union leaders were standing with the mayor as he made that announcement.
Right. But again, important to see that there are some steps being taken. I have to ask you about schools opening this fall. We know they're going to open in person. There's no other option. The students have to get back to developing in the schools. What do you have to say about the CDC guideline that recommends masks to be worn in the schools regardless of vaccination? How are you looking at it?
I'm going to follow the science. If we're receiving CDC recommendations that our babies should wear masks in schools for their personal protection and also to avoid the spreading of COVID-19, then let's follow the guidance of the CDC. I know it is uncomfortable, and I know many parents are concerned about their children wearing a mask. But we need to really understand the complexity of COVID-19. We don't have the vaccine for younger children. No vaccines have been approved for younger children. And so let's be as cautious as possible. We know masks are doing a great job in preventing the widespread of COVID. And so it's a simple way to do so. Yes, it's an inconvenience. I don't like wearing it all the time also, but it clearly shows how can we slow down the spread of COVID-19.
Right. I have to ask you, what is your biggest fear with COVID-19? Especially, if you take office in November, what do you think you'll be inheriting?
Well, there's a couple of things that I am concerned about. Number one, I don't want us to go backwards where we saw our city shut down. So I want to do everything as possible not to wait until an emergency state. And then I'm concerned about our children. Not being in school is not only the academic loss, particularly in math, but it's also the socialization. You could only imagine what it is to be out of school, not being able to socialize, being around your friends and colleagues and other young people, sharing information. This was extremely difficult and challenging for our young people. And part of their development of their full personhood is more than just academic, but is also developing who they are, and their characteristics are developed as they learn from other children.
Yes, definitely. Let's now talk about the economy. I have a couple of questions here. We have discussed economic recovery of Brooklyn. At a certain point, you were really happy with how things were going up. Now with these cases surging, the Delta variant spreading, how are you looking at the economic recovery? And also, what do you have to say about the small businesses which still continue to suffer?
There's so much we must do for the small businesses in the city. And there are several things I believe we can put in place right away. Number one, we must be safe. I say this often, the prerequisite to prosperity is public safety and justice. They go together. And we must have a safe city. We have to deal with the increase in guns and gang violence. I'm happy that the president is handing down much needed financial resources to look at a holistic approach to dealing with guns and gang violence, because if we don't get that under control, we're going to lose tourism, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry. We're going to lose our high-income earners. Their tax dollars pay for the police, the fire, and other parts of our city services. And we're going to really scare new businesses from coming here. So we must become a safe city. Second, we have to stop being an expensive, too difficult and bureaucratic city to do business. It's important that we streamline government so that business can open and not receive the overwhelming number of citations and challenges to get business up and operated. And third, we should look at our procurement. I think it's important that we use the $22.5 billion in procurement dollars. We need to show ways of spending those dollars right here in our city to recycle them instead of outside our city.
How much funding or resources does the city still need from the state government or the federal government?
Well, I believe the allocation of dollars we receive from the state and federal government put us on a solid footing. We're going to now increase our budget to $98 billion. We need to be smart with those dollars. Now, I think that we should put money in a rainy day fund. It's clear that we put $1 billion in that fund already, but I think we should also go even further. We should do a 3 to 5% cut in every agency to make sure that we start streamlining government so that we can be more cost effective and use taxpayers' dollars better. I think that the government has done its job on a federal level. They gave us the boost that we need. Now it's time for us to do our job and use those dollars to go after some of the systemic inequalities that exist and build a strong foundation for our future.
What do you have to say about helping out the middle class? You know, you've actually stated, even on your Twitter, that we have to do more work for the hardworking families, for the middle class of the city. What did you mean by that?
Well, I call myself the blue-collar mayor, a blue-collar candidate, I should say, as we move towards November 2nd on election day. God willing, I would be the blue-collar mayor. And the election showed how my message resonated with everyday New Yorkers. I won 4 of the 5 boroughs in the city, and you saw a cross-section of different ethnic groups. We have often ignored the everyday middle-class New Yorkers. There's a lot of resources and support we show for low-income New Yorkers, and high-income New Yorkers are able to use their financial means to move forward. But we need to lean into middle-class New Yorkers, the teachers, the accountants, the everyday individuals who are attempting to stabilize their lives. And so the goal is to move low-income New Yorkers into middle class and have middle-class New Yorkers stabilized so they can continue to raise their children and families in the city. And there's so much we can do. Our property tax system is unfair. It's higher in certain parts of the city. That is really, the system itself is unfair. We can look at ways of increasing the reduced fare Metro card to put money back into the pockets of New Yorkers. And what I call my New York City Care program is a program where we use the Earned Income Tax Credit to help those struggling New Yorkers to put, again, money back into their pockets and then automate the city. We believe in the My City card, a card that would allow New Yorkers to receive the support that they need without having to go from agency to agency. And I'm sorry, I said the program was New York City Care. It's NYC Aid, the name of my program that uses Earned Income Tax Credits.
Right, definitely. And I think it's so important for us to reflect on these working families. And I'm so glad that you're advocating for them. Let's now talk about something that you had just mentioned a little bit before, the issue of gun violence and crime. I know you had a meeting with President Biden on this, and I know you have met many Democratic officials on this. You have said that this is your key priority of focus. A, I'd like to know, why is this your key priority of focus? And B, a lot of this is to help Black and brown communities. That's what you're doing that work for. What have you seen in these communities that really need help for?
Well, we must have a two-pronged approach of what I call intervention and prevention. Prevention, those are the long-term things we must do. When you look at the feeders of crime, 80% of the men and women at Rikers Island don't have a high school diploma or an equivalency diploma. And some reports out of Texas show that 30% of the prisoners were dyslexic. Here in New York, 55% of the prisoners have learning disabilities. 48% have mental health illnesses. And so as we deal with crime, we must stop the feeders. Everything from the foster care children aging out prematurely that turn to a life of crime because they don't have support that they deserve. Those are the long-term prevention plans, but they must be intervention. We have to deal with the gun violence right now. And so I would reinstitute a plainclothes unit that's going to zero in on those who are carrying guns. I think our judges must ensure that those who are found using guns or carrying guns receive bail so they don't return to our streets with dangerous action. We must partner with our federal, state, and city agencies to put in place I call a JGGF, Joint Gun Gang Task Force, so that we can focus on information sharing and stop the flow of guns in our city. You won't believe, but a large number of guns that are used in our city, those guns are actually being used by people who did not purchase the guns in the first place. And so we need to do more to prevent the flow of guns in our city.
Yes, this brings me to a very important issue. You are a retired captain from the police force. And, you know, the police has been in a bit of an issue since last year with a lot of Black Lives Movement, calling for defunding of police. So my question to you is, what role do you think the police has in controlling gun violence in the city and also controlling crime rate? And how are you going to balance, because I know you're a supporter of Black Lives Matter cause as well, how will you balance those two?
And you can balance the two. You can have the justice you deserve and the safety you need. I spent my life leaning into accomplishing this task as a person who was abused by police misconduct, and then later becoming a police officer and fighting for police reform. And so I know how to get that balance. We're going to have the backs of our police officers so that they can fight crime, but we're also going to hold our police officers accountable. Those who are abusive, we're going to expeditiously remove them from our police department and give them the support internally so that they know that they're going to be in an environment where we lift up the nobility of policing and the profession that it brings. And so we can have both. Don't let anyone tell you that you have to succumb to lawlessness because of the concerns of not having proper justice in our police department. I know it could be done, and we're going to show people how to do it.
Right. And, the South Asian community has faced the issues of gun violence. They have also faced discrimination, and they're also currently struggling with the economic recovery. What are the resources available from your office for the South Asian American community?
Well, number one, we're going to make sure that my administration is reflective of the diversity in the city, including the South Asian community. We must see ourselves in the government that represents us. And you're right, when you look at some of the bias crime, when you look at some of the problems around businesses and other support, and then even some of the gun violence that the South Asian community is experiencing. We all want a safer city. And I'm going to create a partnership with these various communities so we can have a unified, diverse voice at the table as we lean into the success of making our communities a safe place to raise our children and families.
Right. And, I just have two more questions left here for you, Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams. The first one I have to ask you, today we saw the first public Capitol hearing on the insurrection that happened in January 6th. I would like to know your personal opinion on what happened and how did you look at the police that were trying to protect? Because today we saw testimonies from police officers, and that was very important for us to hear. How are you looking at this whole situation, and do you think we will find justice through this?
Yes, we will. And I take my hat off to the government for holding the hearings. It is important that we get to the bottom of this. That was a attempt to take over the symbol of our country. Our capital is extremely important. It is a symbol of who we are. And we cannot allow that ever to happen. And we should get to the bottom of this. And everyone who was responsible should be held accountable for it. And if any government official played a role, they too should be held accountable.
Right. My final question to you, I have to ask you, November will hopefully see an unprecedented number of Black leaders coming into office. And hopefully one of them would be you, because you are the projected winner for November for Mayor of New York City. What kind of responsibility do you hold for the Black culture on your shoulders right now? And, what does that mean to you to see so many fellow Black leaders come into the forefront for justice, for, community, for diversity? How is that looking for you?
This is so important and it's significant. When you saw Obama become the president of the United States, it sent a symbol to all the other ethnic groups around this country that the possibilities are open for them. You saw a Chinese gentleman run for president. You saw local elected officials of different South Asian communities run for office. You're seeing South Asian representatives becoming part of the city council and other places in the state. Assemblywoman Jennifer Rajkumar, an amazing lawmaker, is now the first woman South Asian to serve in the state lawmaking body. And so when an African American moves to this level of prominence in government after experience just about every level of racism, segregation, and all the other aspects of being denied participation. It sends a signal to those other groups who are experiencing or who have experienced that the possibilities are there to reach to a point that you too can represent our country in this manner. So this is exciting for all of us, not only the African Americans who are reaching these levels, but it is a wake-up call to all groups that you don't have to walk in the shadows of the American dream. You can walk in the sunlight of all that it promises.
Right. I know I said last question, but this is my last question. You know, you are a huge proponent of plant-based diet. You're a huge proponent of meditation, and you're a huge proponent of mental wellness. And, you know, we're seeing mental health crises across the country, especially in New York City and even in the Brooklyn borough. What are you doing about that? And will you be carrying this forward when you become the mayor?
Yes, I will. It is extremely important that we don't feed our healthcare crises. And it is my push to look at every place that government is feeding New Yorkers in our schools, in our prisons, in our hospitals. Everywhere where we are feeding New Yorkers, we should be feeding them healthy food. You can't spend millions of dollars in the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene fighting childhood obesity, diabetes, and asthma. Yet every day we serve our babies 960,000 meals, and those meals cause childhood obesity, diabetes, and asthma. When someone goes to a hospital for diabetes, they should not be fed food that would aggravate their diabetes. And people who are in homeless shelters, they should be eating healthier food because many of them are dealing with chronic diseases. And so I'm going to push a healthy agenda and show New Yorkers that they have an option so that they can see the power of food because food is health and health is good food.
Yes, definitely. That's such a good message to hear at the end of this conversation. Thank you so much for your time today on ITV Gold.
Thank you. Take care.